Hello everyone, welcome to the Archaeological Research Seminar. Today I'm very proud to introduce Veronica Aniceti. She's going to talk about the topic of her talk is Time for Change, Investigating Shifts in Food and Agricultural Economies in Northern and Southern Europe through a zooarchaeological lens, roughly 7th to 15th century AD. And Veronica is a postdoctoral researcher here in Bergen as a zooarchaeologist. She also has a background as an archaeologist. And she's attached to the Food Impact Project. Before I introduce you properly, we have a exhibition opening today about rock art. So if you're interested in having an early peek, just hang back in the lobby here. So the floor is yours, Veronica.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is your phone?
Yeah, I can just leave it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, hi everybody. Well, first of all, thanks to all the people involved in the organization of the archaeology seminar for this very nice, kind invitation. I'm an archaeologist specializing in the study of animal remains. I'm a zooarchaeologist, and in the last years, I've been involved in different research projects based in the UK, Italy, and also Norway. So over the last 45 minutes, I'll be sharing with you some of the zooarchaeological results I obtained from my previous and also current research collaboration. So two different and very far from each other geographic areas are the focus of this talk, Norway and Sicily, and the analyzed chronological period refers to the Middle Ages, which encompass, as you can see, different centuries according to the analyzed area. So for Norway, the analyzed period spans from the 11th till the 16th century, and then for Sicily, from the 7th, 8th till the 14th century AD. The research approach is that of zooarchaeology, but why it's so important to study animal remains and why we should, I think that animal remains should represent a conditio sine qua non within archaeological research. The explanation is rather clear and maybe straightforward, but not for everybody. Following Umberto Albarella's word, Umberto is a zooarchaeologist in Sheffield, very well-known zooarchaeologist, but also mentor and friend. He said that the evolution and also functioning of human society are highly dependent on the nature of the interaction between people and animals. And complementary to their ecological and also economic importance is the key roles that animals have had in shaping human ideology, religion, art, and generally culture. So it's therefore obvious that our existence on this planet has been and still is determined by the way we have interacted and also still interact with the animal world. Yes, in this talk we are going to tackle two research aspects, landscape and food. So close to research allocation was landscape management, but then we end up with these very fancy rectangles. So evidence from zooarchaeology plays a critical role in revealing how human society used resource and also shaped landscape, as well as how they adapted their existence in the face of environmental changes. Parts of this talk will address questions about resource utilization and also landscape alteration, but also uncover the intricate connection and also mutual influences between these animals and also the surrounding environment. In addition to landscape, the second aspect we are going to tackle is that of dietary habits and also food taboos. So why food is relevant to us? Because of course food represents what we are. Food is has an important nutritional values, but it's not only a matter of calories. No, of course food represents a powerful symbol of identity. And food can be defined as an embodied material culture, so as people usually eat or avoid to eat specific type of food, these become parts of their cultural roots. On the basis of this, and also considering that all resources are available, it follows that humans kind of symbolically create identity through what they consume and avoid consuming. So let's start now with the first case study, which is on medieval Norway. So this study is the result of 2 years postdoc I did here in Bergen from April 2021 till this June 2023. And this was and still is involved in the Food Impact Project, which is a 4-year research project funded by the Research Council of Norway. And the Food Impact represents the first major study of urban food culture with a specific focus onto medieval Oslo. The project is led by Marianne Wedeler from the University of Oslo, and also several scholars from different universities are involved, and among them there is also Ann-Karin, who acted as my supervisor. The zooarchaeological analysis I'm going to talk about, of course, have been carefully selected and also adapted to better answer the research question of the Food Impact Project, such as the detection of food changes and also potential evidence of social differentiation, supply trade networks among different site types, and also the development of new agricultural technique. My research on medieval Oslo has been significantly influenced by previous work, particularly those conducted by Rolf Lee and Ann-Karin, and these studies have provided me with a solid launching pad from which to begin. So concerning the use methodology, the recording of animal remains followed the protocol designed by Albarella and Davis 1994, which is based on the diagnostic zone method. And here below you have a complete list of all the archaeological analysis I carried out over these 2 years. And for time reason, today we only focus, of course, on the one that are highlighted in bold, so mainly the number of identified specimens on the main domesticates, mainly sheep, goat, cattle, and pig, the kill-off pattern through the epiphyseal fusion of postcranial bones of cattle, pathological evidence on cattle postcranial bones, and also size and shape of cattle. The project analyzed areas that of medieval Oslo, and in particular the fauna sample recovered from Oslo Gate 6. Archaeological findings from the 70s suggest that Oslo started its urban development in the early 11th century, possibly as a local trading hub. In the 70s, archaeological excavation at Oslo Gate 6 uncovered 5 structures. The structure number 2, 3, and 4 were fully excavated, while 1 and 5 were only partially investigated. And here you have a picture where all the archaeological excavation of medieval Oslo are, and then this dot refers to Oslo Gate 6. So the site chronological phases encompass 2 pre-urban phases, which have been merged in this table, and then 5 urban phases culminating in a fire event. And the chronology is determined by the above-mentioned fires, along with the dating of pottery, shoes, combs, and also C14 dating. No fauna remains were found in the pre-urban phases, and then we decided to exclude the ones coming from phase 7 as not relevant to the project. So in the first year of my postdoc, I recorded approximately 10,000 animal remains. The earliest urban occupation at the site dates back to the 11th century and was relatively sparse, with areas defined by wooden perimeters, which were likely used for separating fields and or for enclosing animals. In the early years, metalworking activities prevailed, and then by the late 12th, mid-13th century, the site transformed into a hub for shoemakers, and this is suggested by the abundance of discarded leather materials. During the 13th and 14th century, Oslo experienced a substantial urban growth with new residential areas, workshop, and also commercial spaces. However, information about these later phases at Oslo Gate 6 is very limited, possibly due to the city's gradual decline and or to less favorable preservation condition. So in our research, I examined the fauna sample from Oslo Gate 6 along medieval samples from various sites in Norway. And the provided table is only for visual reference, also because it's kind of impossible to read, showing you the diversity of all the comparative sites we use. And these sites were chosen from Oslo, Tønsberg, Stavanger, Bergen, and Trondheim, with most being urban sites and only few monastic sites. If you see, we have like 3 monastic and the other are urban sites. Then most of them are dated to define chronological phase within the medieval period, but few of them, the ones that are in bold, are generally dated to the medieval period. Our comparative study primarily focused on cattle, sheep, goat, and also pig incidents, and also cattle aging profiles. Unfortunately, we did find many challenges in obtaining biometrical and also information on pathological evidence across all these comparative sites, which led us to exclude them from our analysis. So the only exception, of course, to this is the site of Oslo Gate 6, which I personally study. So in order to allow comparison, we group all sites into these chronological phases, and this allows us to explore patterns across sites and also different medieval phases. Most of the comparative sites were recorded in the 80s, 90s, and also different recording protocols were used to record animal bones and teeth. And this is why, in order to ensure impartial, or let's say a more objective comparison among site and also time periods, we took some precautionary measure in the selection of the fauna remains we wanted to analyze. So let's start with the first analysis. Here you have different graphs showing you the number of identified specimens for cattle, sheep, goat, and also pig in different early medieval phases at different urban sites located in Oslo. What do we see is that cattle is always the most incident species, is followed by sheep and goat, and then pig. And then sheep and goat kind of slightly increase over time, mainly at the expenses of pig from phase 2 onwards. As we approach the early medieval phases in Tønsberg and also Trondheim, no visible changes with the previous scenario observed in Oslo are visible. And you see that cattle still maintain a central, a pivotal role, sheep and goat follow, and then again pig plays a minor role. And then, again, a very similar trend is present in the late medieval phase in Oslo, Trondheim, and also Bergen for the site of Bergen here. In this ternary plot, we compare the proportion of cattle, sheep, goat, and pig in various site types, urban and the very few monastic religious sites we have. And this graph includes the site we analyzed before, plus the one, if you remember, there were these sites generally dated to the medieval period, so this graph includes also this site. And as you see, we keep finding similar patterns across different site types, and there indeed no visible changes, and this further highlights the central role of cattle in Norway, which I think is very interesting. During the late medieval period, sheep goats became more prominent at the expenses of pigs. And this is a trend also seen in other northern European sites like Sweden, England, Iceland, and also Greenland. And this shift may be attributed to urban expansion, landscape changes, meaning less forest, resulting in a shift from a more free range to a more intensive management of these animals, which was unsuited to keep many animals. And in the case of Norway, also the introduction the potential introduction of food taboos during the conversion to Christianity might have also played a role in this, as pork was often considered unclean, as reported by some written sources. A change in the age at which pigs were culled has also been detected in the late medieval period at Oslogate 6 and Oslogate 4. Pigs were indeed culled at a farther earlier age in comparison to the previous periods, and this pattern might be due to the presence of a faster growing pig breeds, which could have been slaughtered at a younger age without compromising the meat quality quantity, or maybe it can be due a preference for more tender meat. So if on one hand, the incidence of cattle, sheep, goat, and pig is very homogeneous, is very similar across different site types and also phases, husbandry practices of cattle differ much over time. And here you have different histograms displaying cattle culling profiles using the fusion stage of postcranial bones. So in Oslo and Trondheim, in phase one, approximately the 40% of cattle are culled when they are very, very young. Then you have the 20% culled when they reach the optimum weight stage, meaning that when they are sub-adult. And then you have like the 40% who survived after having reached their third, fourth year of age. But these trends evolve in the following phases with fewer young animals culled, you see here, and more animals that were kept alive, almost the 60% after the third, fourth year, so when they are very old, okay? And these might suggest the use in working-related activities. The same trend is also evident in Trondheim and also extends to most of the sites we have examined during the late medieval phases. However, there are a few exceptions to this pattern, notably in Bergen, when there is a clear emphasis on meat production. You see here, and also these two sites here, and also at one site in Tonsberg. So were these sites specifically designed as meat production center? I have no idea, actually. I don't have the answer to this question yet, but it's rather interesting to see these differences among different sites. So, and here you have a summary of cattle epiphyseal fusion data. What we see is that in eastern Norway and also Trondheim, there is a shift from raising cattle for butter, milk, and although to a lesser extent meat production, to a greater use of this animal as a traction force. Exceptions to this trend do exist, as we have seen in the Bergen and also in Tonsberg, in one site at Tonsberg. However, we do know that mortality profiles do not directly identify products or services as they compare theoretical production of optimized models in living population to patterns in time average death assemblages. Also, these models are not universally appropriate. For example, an abundance of older animals might also be an indicator, might also suggest a high status context, okay? As a result, aging per se cannot be the only evidence supporting a stronger use of cattle for agricultural works. So let's see what biometrical analysis suggests us. And here you have log ratio histograms where only width and depth of postcranial bones of cattle have been analyzed. All graphs show a rather unimodal distribution. You see here and here. But then we do have a an increase in size from phase 1 to phase 2, and then cattle slightly increase also from phase 2 to phase 3. And such changes have also been statistically tested, and the t-test confirmed that their significance is high. Biometrical analysis can be used, of course, for a variety of purposes, and we do know that animal size might be affected by a variety of factors, and different also in sex ratio can be one of these. Sexual dimorphism affects certain elements more than others, and these can be selected when investigated changes in sex ratio or the relative proportion of male, females, and also castrated individuals. So to examine whether these changes were and are related to changes in the sexual composition, I analyzed width and depth from the most, let's say, sex-dependent bones, like humeri and also metapodials, and the log ratio histograms show a noteworthy shift. So in phase 1, there is a unimodal distribution, but then from phase 2 onwards, you see that we do have a more bimodal distribution of values. And these may represent larger individuals, this group here, possibly representing oxen, and very large values might also signify, refers to the very few males. And this pattern, of course, persists not only in phase 1, but also in the later phases. So as the biometrical values do not vary much from the previous graph, it might also be possible that in addition to a change in the sex composition, different cattle breeds and or a local improvement are behind these changes. So biometrical analysis, of course, on teeth and also ancient DNA analysis could shed light on this matter. And the existence of different breeds among the main domesticates in the medieval period is not, let's say, a novel concept, as evidenced by a research article on domestic folk conducted by Sam Walker and Hanneke Meyer. Cattle, of course, are not naturally built for plowing or pulling carts, and such activities are often stress their skeletal tissues. In zooarchaeology, we typically determine the use as draw cattle also through pathological condition, like when we find this very broad diaphysis or exostosis on the proximal and also the distal part of phalanges. So we do find pathological evidence on cattle metapodials and also phalanges in phases 2, 3, and 4 at Oslogate 6, and no one in phase 1. But overall, these are very few. We are talking about less than the 3% of the total. Still, it's very interesting to see that we haven't found any in period 1, while there are pathological conditions on cattle postcranial bones in the other phases. So, the period between the 9th and the 13th century saw dramatic changes in farming practices across large parts of Europe, enabling an increase in cereal production so great that it has been often described as an agricultural revolution. And this, let's call it cerealization, allowed population not only to recover, but to boom, fueling the growth of towns and also market. And 3 key innovations made this increase in yields possible: crop rotation, the widespread adoption of the moldboard plough, which enabled farmers to cultivate heavier and also more fertile soils, and also the extensification of cultivation. In England, for example, this meant that many regions became more densely populated than ever before. But what about Norway? So Norway, we know that is geographically located at the northmost tip of Europe and is, like I say, generally characterized by an overall harsh physical environment and also climate. And in comparison to its Scandinavian neighbors, such as Sweden and also Denmark, Norway has only approximately the 3% of arable lands and present also a much more varied and also complex topography, thus suggesting for a rather marginal role in agricultural improvement and growth. The use of plough in Scandinavia is scarcely documented in archaeology and is only vaguely mentioned in 13 written sources. And based on the scarce archaeological evidence, it appears that Norway and other Scandinavian nations and countries embraced heavier plough several centuries after their implementation in southern Europe, roughly between the 11th and 13th century. And the presence of solid horseshoes in early medieval context served as an archaeological indicator to suggest the utilization of horses as main road animals in medieval Norway. However, this has never been studied nor proved zooarchaeology. However, I do think that the context is far more complex than this, and it needs to better contextualize in its historical, also archaeological framework. So during medieval times, the hilly terrain and also the vast forest of eastern and central Norway offered a more favorable agricultural condition in comparison to other parts of the country, resemble kind of those of the ones found in northern England. And in the early medieval period, the emergence and also the development of urban centers and also the presence of a potential warmer climate period facilitate population growth. And since the 13th century, the Norwegian population doubled, in certain areas even tripled, with the eastern part being among the most densely populated areas in Norway. So given the growing population and also the higher food demands, the necessity to transform less fertile areas into cultivable lands became essential, thereby promoting advances in agricultural technology. Compared to the previous period, paleobotanical studies have also attested for a more diversifying grain production in 12th, 13th century Norway, and even though productivity levels may not have been exceptionally high, people appear to have maximized the utilization of cultivable lands, even in cases of modest yields. So to conclude, the obtained archaeological data suggests that cattle played a major role in Norway's economy, and their increasing use for works observed between the 12th and the 14th century coincide with a series of events: warmer period, population growth, establishing of urban centers, surplus production, for which this animal became more and more essential for working the surrounding lands and also maximizing its productivity. So the shift in cattle exploitation from being primarily a food source to playing a more multifaceted role was instrumental in Norway's agrarian economy's advancement and also growth. As a result, this transformation played a vital role in early medieval Europe economic development. So although it is also likely that few horses were used as working animals, the higher cost of maintenance and also care, coupled with the cultural reluctance to consume them at the very end of their working life, as opposed to cattle, made them less economically viable to rear in large number. Of course, several other limitations of this study that must be considered and also listed so that future works might fill such gaps. Well, I'm sure that you have seen that these analyses are kind of unbalanced. So we do need more analysis to get a more comprehensive, a more complete understanding of dynamics. The selected site, we are basically referred to urban with very, very few religious with zero rural sites. So of course the interpretation is kind of biased, right? And then the different recording protocols. We did took precautionary measures, but still here we are dealing with a lot of fauna samples recorded with different recording methods. And then of course we do lack the integration with written sources and also other archaeological materials, pottery and others. However, I do think that this study should not be considered as an exhaustive, let's say, summary of what's going on in terms of animal husbandry in medieval Norway, but rather as a diving board that open more questions for future and interesting works. Let's jump now from the very north to the very, very south. So this second study is the results of a previous postdoc funded by an advanced ERC called Sicily in Transition, Sync Transit. I did in New York and Rome, but the focus, of course, was medieval Sicily and its Arab period. So the project aims at answering a series of issues related to animal exploitation in Sicily. And the political system considered in this project, namely the Byzantine, the Arabs, and also the Norman Swabians, backed up by a substantial different cultural context, are likely to have had a different impact on husbandry strategies. And more in detail, is likely that the different perspective and also ambitions of the Arab administration would have led to the introduction of new husbandry practices. The legacy of this technological and also cultural innovation may have varied geographically and also on different site types. At the same time, dietary prohibition and also important tradition could have been loosely or firmly applied on the dominated population. So one of the main questions of this postdoc was why and to what extent this did this apply to medieval Sicily. So, before showing you the zooarchaeological results, I'm going to give you a very quick, very superficial, let's say, historical information on medieval Sicily, and especially on its Arab period. So, until early 9th century, Sicily was under the Byzantine administration. Later, in 827, the Arab landed in Mazara del Vallo, here, and then after 4 years they moved to Palermo, and then Palermo became in 831 the capital of the island, and then the Arab conquest proceed eastward, so from here to the eastern part. The Arab conquest of Sicily was not a smooth and quick process, but it was rather long, and its rather complicated nature is well visible in the archaeological and also in the historical record. Later, the Normans arrived, and they conquered the island in 30 years approximately, 1061 from 2000 to 1091. And after the Normans, the Swabian arrived, and among the most important political figure of this time is Frederick II. Again, the recording method is the same as before, so is Albarella and Davis 1994, the diagnostic zone method, and here you have, again, all the analysis I carried out. For time reason, we focus on the number of identifying specimens, again on the main domesticate, but this time is not cattle, but is sheep our focus, so the kilo pattern, again with the postcranial bones, and then size and shape of sheep. So here you have a map showing you the archaeological site I have analyzed. As you can see, most of them are located on the western side of the island, which is also, let's say, defined as the most Islamized part of the island, and only one is from the eastern part. Most of them are urban site. The only exception is the number 5, which is a rural site, and also Colmitella and Roccicella, which are both are rural site, and they are the only ones showing and be characterized by a Byzantine phase. Okay, so let's start with the number of identified specimens. Again, cattle, sheep, goat, and suites. For the rural site of Roccicella and Colmitella in the Byzantine period. As you can see, sheep and goat are the most abundant species. Suites have a similar incidence to that of sheep-goat at Colmitella. And then cattle is the third represented species and is more abundant at Colmitella than at Roccicella. And here you have the same histograms, but is divided between urban and rural site in the Arab period. And what we notice is that in both Arab urban and also rural site, sheep-goat, as in the Byzantine period, continue to play a primary role in the husbandry practices of the island. Cattle often play a more marginal role and is usually the third species. Suid remains, which refer to pig, and I will explain why it's so important to highlight this taxonomic identification, are almost absent in the urban side, you see here, almost, but then they are present at the rural site. And this difference is rather interesting, as it's well known that the consumption of pork is haram, so it's prohibited in the Islamic religion, and then we will come back to this topic in a minute. In the later Norman-Swabian period, we have a slightly more varied picture. At Corso de Mille, pig continue to be absent, but then you see that pig here is the most incident species at the Norman Palace in Palermo, and pig increase in comparison to the previous site, to the previous Arab site at Mazzara del Vallo. So I'll quickly go back to the issue of the domestic and or wild origin of the suid remains in the here analyzed Sicilian site. So in zooarchaeology, it's well known that the distinction between pig and wild boar remains is not always easy. And it's of primary importance, of course, for this research, especially for the Arab period. And the reason for this is mainly related to the fact that ethnozooarchaeological studies have demonstrated that the wild form, namely the wild boar, is consumed, although in rare cases, by Muslim communities living in areas where Islam is the main religion, such as Syria, Sudan, Iran, and also Maghreb. For example, in present-day Morocco, wild boar liver is consumed to acquire the same strength as the animal or as a remedy for syphilis. All of this suggests that in modern times, the wild boar is not subject to the same dietary taboo as the pig. And this, of course, could have also been valid in the past, given that there is no a clear mention of a prohibition against this animal in the Quran. So as mentioned before, the distinction between pig and wild boar in zooarchaeology is not always easy, and it's almost never straightforward. So relying on the bone size is, this is my point of view, is very unreliable. That doesn't really consider a potential increase in pig size over historical times, leading to various and potential problems. So one way to overcome this issue is to analyze teeth measurements, and specifically those on molars. And during the domestication process from the wild boar, one of the pig skeletal parts that has undergone many changes is the pig snout, which has slowly contracted and also reduced, resulting in smaller teeth compared to those of the wild boar. Compared to postcranial bones, teeth show little or no sexual dimorphism. Thus, they are very more reliable than bones in order to distinguish between closely related species. So, to analyze the taxonomic identification of the suid present at the here analyzed site, it was decided to examine the measurement of the length, anterior width, and posterior width of the mandibular teeth. So here you have several histograms where measurement of suid teeth have been analyzed at different sites in their Arab phase. As you can see, most of the values are distributed kind of unimodally. And then we do have here to the left values showing higher, say, values. But overall, we can say that if these, let's say, higher values may represent wild boar, then, you know, the majority, most of values may represent pig, so the domestic, let's say, form. The pig taboo has been and also continue to be a significant anthropological topic that has given rise to extensive debates among scholars over the last 50 years and perhaps even longer. And many books and articles have been written, and also numerous theories have been developed to explain the origin of such a taboo. Among the various hypotheses, in addition to the, let's call it, socio-cultural ones, which consider pig as a dirty, impure animal due to its biological characteristic in reproduction and also feeding, the environmental perspective is perhaps the most widely used to explain a scarcity and or absence of pig remains in specific contexts. And this theory suggests that the absence or scarcity of pigs in certain areas is due to specific characteristics of the surrounding environment, such as a lack of a vegetative cover and also water. Pig, in fact, require a constant presence of shade and water as they lack sweat glands and therefore cannot regulate the body temperature through sweating. However, the absence of pig remains in the urban site of Palermo and also Mazara del Vallo during the Arab period cannot be explained by this environmental theory. First, we do have a simultaneous presence of pigs in rural sites, like we saw in Colmitella and also Roccicella, as well as other contemporary sites which have been studied by some colleagues. And the second reason is related to the obtained data from palynological and also anthropological analysis, which have confirmed the presence of wooded areas and also areas with thermophilic plants in Arab Sicily, such as those of the Mediterranean maquis, thus representing a possible environmental niche for pig farming. Someone, of course, might argue that the scarcity of pig in Sicily is a phenomenon which is rooted not so much, let's say, in the Arab period, but it started before, in the previous Roman, Byzantine, and Roman periods, for which we have more data and also analyzed sites. We have already seen that this theory is not valid for the Byzantine site we have analyzed, but here you have a ternary plot showing the incidence of, again, cattle, sheep, goat, and pig for the Roman Byzantine period in Sicily, the Arab, and then the Norman Swabian. What is clear from this graph is that pigs were a very important resource in the Roman Byzantine period, both in rural sites and also in villas. And the situation changed in the Arab period, where despite a few exceptions, pigs are absent in urban sites and they are present in rural ones. The situation changes again in the Norman Swabian Sicily, here, where the scenario of pig presence absent is more varied and might suggest, in the case of its presence, that Muslim communities were still kind of inhabiting the specific site in a context where the majority of the population was Christian, as it perhaps is the case of Corso de Mille that we saw previously together. So, let's leave the pig taboo and let's dig deeper into the role of sheep, goat, and also the husbandry practices. So morphological and also biometrical analysis have suggested that most bones and teeth of caprines can be attributed to sheep rather than to goats, with few goats present in each analyzed population. During the Byzantine period, age and death analysis of sheep, which they're not displayed here, but they show that that the sheep were primarily raised for milk and also wool production at both Roccicella and also Colmitella, representing different but both specialized economic activities. The histograms from the Arab period in this slide, as you can see here, show that sheep were culled at different age stages, suggesting the presence of a more generalized and also diversified economy rather than a specialized one. As for the Norman-Swabian period, sheep are culled both at a subadult age stage for meat, as in the case here of Corso de Mille and also the Norman Palace, and also for maybe wool, dairy products at Mazara del Vallo. So again, we do have, again, a more specialized economy activities. So we do have this change. In the Byzantine period, a more specialized one. In the Arab period, a more generalized economy. And then again, a more specialized one in the Norman Swabian period. So let's see now the biometric analysis of sheep postcranial bones. Here you have, again, two log ratio histograms analyzing the width and depth of postcranial bones for the Byzantine and the Arab period at Colmitella. What we can observe is that the size of sheep increase from the Byzantine to the Arab period. And then what happened in the Arab period at urban site. So you see here that The sheep present at Sant'Antonino, at urban site, let's say, located in Palermo and also Mazzara del Vallo. So sheep here have a similar size, the same size actually, as those present in Colmitella in its Arab period, okay? Actually also the same mean, which is rather interesting. The only exception to this trend is the case of Corso de Mille, where sheep are smaller than the contemporary one at urban sites and also at the rural site of Colmitella. Okay, so of course you may think that the observed size increase now is the result of a different sex composition of the analyzed flocks, where of course a higher presence of males could have caused this change, but this increase in size. So to further confirm this increase and to further confirm that this increase is a genuine increase, meaning that it is not affected by a different sex or composition, what I did is to analyze the less sex-dependent bones, such as the tibia, calcaneus, and also the astragalus from the site of Mazzara del Vallo, for which we also have the Norman Swabian phase. As we can observe, there is an additional increase in size from the Arab to the Norman Swabian period. Therefore, it seems that these strategies of improving sheep continues, and we can affirm that in this case is a genuine increase in size, which is not, of course, the result of a different sexual composition. Interestingly enough, a similar increase in size had already been identified in Arab context of the 12th century AD in the Iberian Peninsula by Simon Davis and other zooarchaeologists, and specifically in some Portuguese sites. And this process was later identified and kind of anticipated by another zooarchaeologist, Marcos Garcia, who detected an increase in sheep size in the 10th century Spanish context. Thus, we are facing a phenomenon that not only occurs in Sicily in its Arab period, but also in the surrounding regions and countries where Arabs' influence took place, as in the case of Al-Andalus. And this increase aimed at maximizing the production of meat, wool, and milk, and it could be a response to the prohibition on consuming pork, thus serving as in order to optimize food. The increase of sheep size beginning in the Arab period can be the result of two or more phenomena. The first, an introduction of a new type of larger breed, or a different, richer diet of the local sheep population, or maybe also a combination of these two. Among the sheep breeds present in Sicily, the Barbaresca siciliana is very interesting, and this breed seems to have a North African origins, and this is currently raised in the inland areas of the island. The Barbaresca siciliana is the result of the crossbreeding of the Pincerita, which is another local sheep breed in Sicily, with the North African Berber type sheep. And this sheep is characterized by a large size and is utilized in generalized economy, focusing on the production of meat, milk, and wool. And such a breed seems to share a lot of traits with the sheep identified in the Arab context in Sicily. So, of course, it would be very interesting not to further explore this topic with ancient DNA, isotopic analysis, but of course we do need money for this, so it's not always easy. However, why it's so important to understand the nature of such an increase in sheep size in Arab Sicily? With the Arabs in the Mediterranean basin, a phase of changes and also improvement in the agricultural and also hydraulic system begins, along with the introduction of new plant species. Evidence of this has been identified both in Al-Andalus, so in the Iberian Peninsula and Portugal, and also in Sicily. And this transformation is also known as the Arab Agricultural Revolution. Despite this concept has been revised many times, criticizing the revolutionary nature of this phenomenon and also its scope, it's quite undeniable that with the arrival of the Arabs, some changes did indeed happen. So, as far as Sicily is concerned, recent archaeobotanical analysis at the site of Mazara del Vallo during the Arab phase have suggested the presence of new plant species that, to date, do not appear to be present in the early Byzantine or Roman phases. So, considering the faunal data discussed so far, wouldn't be not reasonable to presume that in addition to new agricultural techniques and also landscape exploitation and plants, there were also new animal breeds and also breeding strategies that were introduced by the Arabs into Sicily. I don't have, of course, the definitive answer to this question, although the data seems very promising. As far as the incidence of species is concerned, we have observed that the central role played by caprines and especially sheep in the local economy during the Arab and also the Norman-Swabian period. We have also seen that there is a shift from a more generalized economy in the Arab to a more specialized one in the later phases. And regarding the absence of pigs, it can be said that zooarchaeological data has proven its strong utility to identify sociocultural markers, emphasizing a diversity between rural and also urban sites during the Arab phases. The difference in pig presence might be the results of various factors, such as a weaker and maybe more fragmented control by Arab political and also administrative entities over the rural population, or the coexistence of diverse religious communities. Whatever the answer to this question is, what the zooarchaeological data is suggesting is that the social Islamization of Sicily was a long and complex process. It did not uniformly take root in all conquered areas of the island, but it certainly had a significant social, cultural, economic impact. So this brief concluding, let's say, final slide is just to say that I hope that it has been evident from these two case studies that zooarchaeology, of course, is not just about listing the animal species present at a particular site. It's about letting those remains speak once again by placing them in their historical and also archaeological context. While this seem like a commonplace idea to you, is not. And I do think that there is still much ground to cover in establishing the value of this discipline in contributing to the sociocultural, economic, and religious dynamics of the communities that once exist and will continue to exist. So thank you very much for your attention and for having me here today.
Veronica, fantastic presentation, a lot of depth. Are there any questions? I have one. It might be a bit of a silly one, but did you, what was the most surprising species you identified among your data that you have not been able to present here?
For Sicily or for Norway?
Both.
For both? Well, for Norway, we do have very interesting data coming from the zooms analysis on sheep-goat mandibles. So at least in Oslogate 6, it seems that sheep were mainly raised for meat production, while goat for milk and or wool. So we have this very distinctive pattern. And then in Sicily, very interesting data is from the fallow deer, which is not a kind of unexplored species among the cervid. So it's something that I would like to study in the near future, if I have time. Thank you for the question.
Have you discovered any other avenues you want to pursue the tail end of this massive project or these massive projects?
Well, I have many ideas in my brain. Of course, I would like, first of all, I would really like to continue this study on medieval Norway. I think that we do have many things to discover, many sites, many faunal remains that should be investigated with current methodology so that all data can be kind of more or less more comparable than what they are now. And also, let's say the peak role is something kind of interesting, this kind of decreasing in pig incidence over the medieval period is something that not only happened in medieval Norway, but in also the nearby, the surrounding country, which can be another topic. Many topics, no money, but I'll try to figure it out.
Any other questions?
Just a question about pigs versus wild boar. Have you had any, in the Norwegian material, have you found any wild boar?
No wild boar, no. I did some biometrical analysis, but it's quite straightforward that all of the population refers to the domestic ones. So.
Provisioning of urban sites from the countryside.
You're welcome. Yes, I also have, sorry, just my brain working right now. At Oslogate 6, we also found neonatal pig remains, meaning that, of course, there was on-site breeding. And the same is valid also for cattle. So it's nice evidence.
Thank you for a nice presentation. Like a comment, I think Jørgen Rosvold one time did, based on isotopes on pigs, had a comparison study from Hamar and Bergen, if was included, which was quite fascinating.
Yeah.
If you know it.
Yes, I know it. But I think that you're referring to the ones where pigs were mainly fed upon marine sources, yes.
And in Hamar, they were more like fed on remains fodder from domesticates. Have you seen anything like that in Oslo? It's very interesting to see.
Well, we haven't run any isotope analysis on pig remains there, only on cattle postcranial bones, but that's another...
Fantastically interesting thing.
Yes, that's another very interesting topic. Yes, yes.
The other thing I want to comment on generally is of course, the thing that we know a bit later is drifting, which is the Norwegian cowboys, which were big in post-medieval time. And the whole system was that you delivered the cows from western Norway, from the fjord areas, took them up for grazing during the whole summer in the mountains, and delivered them to markets. The first market was Kongsberg, and which is this early industrial town, and also down to Drammen. And I kind of think that maybe the material you're showing here can be like an early start of the same kind of system. We're delivering from the spring, maybe the cows up to the mountain areas, and the reason why more cows in Bergen can be that it's a more urbanized area.
Yes.
And at the same time, we will know that in Western Norway, most of taxation is this kylag system, which is based on cows. And it's known from taxation, as far as I know, that in Bergen there were quite a lot of taxation based on coming in butter. So the production of butter has been really, really big for most farms, which of course links to cattle.
Yeah.
Just a comment if you have
Sure. Yeah. No. Yes, but thank you. These are very nice and interesting comments. Yeah. I'm also taking notes because these things are very important.
There was a project with Niku and Christopher Dahl, and other ones were involved in a butter project, just highlighting these perspectives.
Well, it's true that, for example, in this study, the sites from Bergen are fewer than in Oslo, right? So of course you have a bias also of representation. So, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. To pick up on going with your cattle to the mountains or the feeding grounds in the summer. There is this idea that after the climate changes in the middle of the 6th century, when the climate really worsened, there was this idea that people would survive by breeding more cattle. Can you find similar differences in cattle raising or in just the amount of cattle that you find in cities, depending on how bad the climate is here in Norway?
I haven't looked into this, to be honest. No, I have no idea. I will need more years. But of course, this is another interesting thing. And about this like different feeding during the summer, right time, if I understood correctly, this is something that, for example, just coming to my mind, that oxygen, of course, isotope can kind of might be very nice, no? Might be very useful to look into, of course. So, no, I haven't looked into this. I'm sorry.
Are there any questions in the chat? No. Oh. Okay. Well, another round of applause, I guess. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to you.
And the next research seminar is on the 8th of December. We might have one on the 1st, but we don't know yet. And that should be...
Oh my God.
It is some post-medieval archaeology project from Germany by butchering his surname. But it should be very interesting regardless, so welcome. Feel free to join us then. So thank you very much.
Thank you.